This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm George Thomas. Compromise. That is how President Trump describes the budget deal he just reached with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Gary Lane, my colleague, is following the story and joins us from the CBN newsroom. Gary.
That's right, George. Nancy Pelosi and the president reached the agreement yesterday afternoon. It allows the government to continue borrowing money to pay its bills, and it sets funding levels for the next 2 years. Now, critics say it does nothing to rein in Washington's out-of-control spending. Earlier this week, the White House said it expects deficit spending in 2019 to reach $1 trillion. The overall federal debt is expected to hit $22 trillion. As a matter of fact, some conservative critics of the president say when it comes to the budget, he's really not much different than his predecessors, Obama and Bush. The president has suggested he'll work on cutting the deficit if reelected to a second term. And in all fairness to the president and Congress, only about 1/4 of the $4 trillion federal budget is discretionary spending. Things like education, healthcare, housing, agriculture, and the military. With the federal deficit nearly $22 trillion, about $400 billion just goes to pay interest on the debt. That's nearly half the total annual budget for the U.S. military. And proposed legislation that economists are watching closely would increase the minimum wage. Speaker Pelosi and other Democrats in the House announced they will soon approve an increase in the U.S. minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 per hour. That would be a doubling of the rate within the next 6 years.
The Raise the Wage Act gives up to 33 million Americans a long overdue raise. 33 million Americans. And lifts so many people out of poverty. This bill honors the dignity of work, grows the economy, and upholds the bedrock idea of fairness in our country, that hard work deserves a decent wage.
Republican opponents of the minimum wage increase say it will lead to reduced hours for workers and job losses. They say many small businesses can ill afford to pay workers more, so they'll cut employees' hours and lay them off. And some economists say increased labor costs are passed on to consumers, so it would likely lead to higher prices for goods and services. The minimum wage increase is expected to have a difficult time passing the Senate. As for the budget, the House and Senate may vote on the Trump-Pelosi deal before the congressional summer recess begins. Now, that starts the end of next week for the House, August 2nd for the Senate. They get a nice long vacation. They won't return to Capitol Hill until the second week of September. Back to you in the studio, George.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Gary. Dan Celia, he leads Financial Issues Stewardship Ministries and joins me now with more. So, Dan, many Americans, as you know, they are struggling to pay their bills each week. It's been 10 years since we've raised the minimum wage. Is it long overdue? And how do we do it in a way that people, that will help people without hurting the economy?
George, it's a very difficult situation. Number one is you're absolutely right. It's been 10 years. We need to raise the minimum wage. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with $15 an hour, and I do have a problem with it trying to be a living wage. The minimum wage is not designed to be, never was designed to be a living wage. This is something that President Obama put out there as a living wage. It was at a time when he was incapable of creating the private sector jobs necessary to create living jobs where people can work and live. Here's the thing, George, that's very, very interesting. We have a track record. We have proof that the $15 minimum wage doesn't work. We have seen this in states, counties, municipalities that have all tried to implement this, and it failed. It is going to fail again to spur the economy. It is not going to lift anybody out of poverty. You know, it's very interesting that when we see Bernie Sanders giving his staff a raise of $15, the minimum staff of his campaign, and the next day he cut all their hours. I mean, he just laid out exactly what's going to happen. And that is what's always happened. So this is not an answer. The answer is exactly what has been going on. The answer is minimum wage jobs are a stepping stone into the workforce where they can earn a living wage.
Yeah, and then, Dan, I'm sorry. Let me talk about the budget real quickly. The
Sure.
Trump-Pelosi deal doesn't really address excesses. It seems to me like more of the same spending. What do you think?
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right, George. It's more of the same spending. This has really got me a little bit concerned. Nobody wants to talk about spending. Everybody's talking about everything but government spending. And I have a problem with this. At the top of your broadcast here on this, we heard sound bites of, compromise. Yeah, unfortunately, the compromise did not come in spending. The compromise, we raised the debt ceiling, but we're not cutting spending.
Yeah.
And it's a huge problem, and I'm very, very concerned about $2 trillion more spending.
Absolutely. Dan, sorry, we've run out of time. I got to leave it
No
there.
problem.
Dan, as always, thank you so much. He addresses
All right.
Financial Stewardship Ministry. As always, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, George.
You're most welcome. In other news, abortion activists are still working to fight a new law in Arkansas that goes into effect tomorrow. An official with Arkansas's only surgical abortion clinic says a facility could close within a month if a U.S. federal judge doesn't block a new law restricting who can perform abortions in the state. The law requires that doctors performing abortions be board certified or board eligible in obstetrics and gynecology. 2 other abortion restrictions laws are also set to go into effect tomorrow. One banning late-term abortions, and the other prohibits doctors from performing the procedure if it's solely being sought because the fetus was diagnosed with Down syndrome. Little Rock Family Planning and Planned Parenthood have filed lawsuits against all 3 laws. Overseas, Brexit hardliner Boris Johnson has won the race to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Johnson defeated rival Jeremy Hunt in the Conservative leadership contest, winning 2/3 of the votes. He will take over as Prime Minister Wednesday in a formal handover from Theresa May. May has pledged to give her full support to her successor. President Trump has also tweeted out his support and said Johnson will be great as Britain's next political leader. Johnson has vowed that Britain will quit the European Union on the scheduled date of October 31st, even if it means leaving without a divorce deal. But Parliament has signaled it is determined to prevent him from doing so. President Trump has denied a claim by Iran that it has arrested CIA spies inside its borders. It is the latest development in the face-off between our country and the Islamic Republic. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the standoff between Iran and the West is all part of a high-stakes geopolitical standoff in the Persian Gulf that could lead to a diplomatic solution or war.
Iran released images of what it says are CIA spies, some who face the death penalty. President Trump called it fake news.
That's totally a false story. That's another lie. We are ready for the absolute worst.
Iran also released footage of Britain's captured ship, the Stena Impero, and its crew. U.S. Secretary of State told veterans the U.S. will continue to enforce its maximum pressure campaign on Iran, including sanctioning a major Chinese company.
We've said all along that any sanction will indeed be enforced. We can't tolerate more money going to the Ayatollah, putting American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and putting their life at risk. It's too important.
After the seizure of a British tanker and the recent downing of an American drone, President Trump says negotiations are becoming less likely.
Frankly, it's getting harder for me to want to make a deal with Iran.
One Iranian expert told CBN News Iran is waging a small war against the U.S. and the West. The goal is to keep the war small enough in order to outlast President Trump and the West. They also calculate that President Trump won't want a war with Iran with presidential elections next year. The danger is they could miscalculate the situation or underestimate U.S. resolve. Iran's foreign minister says the tanker threatens safety inside the Strait of Hormuz and added Iran wants normal relations with England and the world.
Iran does not seek confrontation. Iran wants to have normal relations based on mutual respect.
Meanwhile, inside Iran, the U.S. economic sanctions are affecting Iran's economy, a situation some call catastrophic.
This year is worse than any other year as far as I can remember. The inflation and rising of prices that we've experienced over the last 7-8 months is unprecedented. It's too much to put up with.
For its part, Britain says it plans to build a European coalition to safeguard shipping in the Strait of Hormuz and hopes for a diplomatic way forward. The setting for this geopolitical showdown is one of the most important in the world, the Strait of Hormuz, where 1/5 of the world's crude oil passes through each year. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us Regent.
Welcome back to the CBN News channel. Recent reporting from the online publication Politico reveals the Trump administration is considering zeroing out or essentially shutting down its refugee admissions program. Our Heather Sells spoke with Dr. Ed Stenser, the Billy Graham Chair of Church, Mission and Evangelism at Wheaton College, on how evangelicals feel about this issue.
There was a Pew poll last year that made the rounds of social media again recently, and it said that only 1/4 of white evangelicals say the U.S. has a responsibility to accept refugees. Do you think that has encouraged the Trump administration to consider shutting down the U.S. refugee program?
You know, I think that would probably be part of it. I think as we're gearing up for the 2020 election, part of the themes that, of course, President Trump has been trumpeting is that there is a need to shut down illegal immigration, asylum seekers and refugees. I think that's part of the bigger plan. But yes, I think probably seeing that poll and other polls that indicate evangelicals are maybe the least welcoming to refugees and immigrants would certainly embolden a trial balloon like this.
Well, I think it's kind of confusing because there is that Pew poll, but then you also have a lot of evangelical churches that welcome refugees. So from your standpoint, I'm curious as to where you see evangelicals landing on this issue.
Yeah, and it's a strange contrast. You know, I remember actually writing an article after speaking at the Refugee Highway Partnership about how whenever I go to a refugee ministry meeting, it's filled with evangelicals who are caring for those that are hurting as refugees. And then I'll often read news stories that say evangelicals are the most anti-refugee. Part of it may be that the U.S. has a responsibility. That word could have maybe caused people to think, well, it's not a responsibility. But I do think it is ultimately something that a nation that is as caring as the United States, that cares for justice and cares for the rule of law, that cares for people who are following processes. Here's a refugee that goes through an almost 2-year process. This is not, I mean, you can argue and debate about illegal immigration and all this sort of stuff. This is not that. So maybe it's education that we need more of. I hope the U.S. will return to its historic levels, which has been under Republican and Democratic administrations, a little under 100,000 refugees a year. This is a drop in the bucket, but it's part of our responsibility of being a kind of a world leader in so many ways. And one of those ways is to say, when there's people in crisis, we're here to be a part of that with such a strongly vetted program like the refugee program.
Do you think there's any case that an evangelical could make to say, hey, the U.S. should not accept refugees? Or do you think that part and parcel of being an evangelical, believing what the Bible says, includes welcoming those who are being persecuted to our country?
Well, I think there's always a sense that it does individually. If someone's hurting individually, I'm going to go to them. I think the Bible doesn't give us a specific number, for example, of how many refugees a country should let in. Ronald Reagan spoke of America as a city set upon a hill, kind of reminding us of some biblical imagery as well. And I think as a city set upon a hill, we want to be those who are a light to the nations, who welcome and care for other people. What that number is, I don't, I can go to Second Opinions, chapter 4, verse 11, and say that's 4,000. I hope it's not zero. I'd like to see it back to where its historic norms have been, just below 100,000, because we have ministries across the country. And, the churches that I've been involved in and serving, every one of them has been involved in refugee resettlement. This is an area where evangelical Christians have really led, and yet the polls say maybe there's kind of a mixed message that's there.
So do you think a shift is going on then within the evangelical world on this issue? Do you think people are maybe retreating from what has previously been a real welcoming of refugees?
Well, I think that's true around the world. I mean, we see a rising nationalism in Quebec, in the UK, and more countries around the whole world, a rising nationalism and an anti-immigrant, anti-refugee mentality that's growing. I think that as followers of Jesus, we would want to be among those who say, can we do this safely? And the answer with the refugee program is clearly and historically yes. Can we do this compassionately? And I think the answer is yes. So I want to be one who advocates to the government that, this is, and to the president. The president actually sets this number since 1980, the Refugee Act of 1980. Republicans and Democrats alike, I hope and I appeal to President Trump to make sure that the world knows that we're a compassionate nation, and he's very concerned about our safety. He runs the refugee resettlement program. He's very concerned about our safety, and I think we have a safe program with a track record of safety. Let's continue it. Let's not shut it down.
Are you hearing much feedback from the pastors and the ministry leaders that you're interacting with about this proposed or possible shutdown?
Actually, yes. And I've received several emails about this. People are, speaking up and speaking out about how they can be a part of it. World Relief, which is part of the National Association of Evangelicals, has been such a key partner. I'm actually in DuPage County, which is one of the leading places where that refugee resettlement ministry takes place. So this, to a lot of us, is kind of surprising. I think for, many evangelicals have been, we know the numbers, right? White evangelicals voted for President Trump at an unprecedentedly high number. But a lot of people are saying, well, maybe this is not the best course of action. And we've seen this before. We saw this with family separation, where evangelical leaders, many of whom were supportive of President Trump, also spoke up and said, this is not the kind of nation we want to be. I would say, again, zeroing out the refugee program is not the kind of nation we want to be.
All right. Ed Stetzer, Wheaton College, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com. Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family. And collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app. A great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs, from health to entertainment, you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place, from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Check your local listings or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
Welcome back to the CBN News Channel. You know, when it comes to losing weight, the body, at least the researchers tell us that it can be easier for men than women. Boris Johnson has more.
After years of frustration, Lori Mazzone found a way to reclaim her high school figure. It helped her lose 11 pounds in just 3 weeks, followed by another 7. And she's not done.
I lost 4 inches off my waist. 4 inches in a month is unbelievable. I had not seen that kind of result in anything that I've done.
Lori balanced her hormones under the direction of gynecologist Sarah Gottfried, who lost 25 pounds when she first tried it on herself.
I started to share it with women in my practice, and the results were amazing. So women lost on average about 15 pounds. They dropped their blood sugar by 21 points. They lost 4 inches off their waist. We now have had 5,000 people go through this program.
If one or more of 7 key hormones is out of whack, forget about losing weight. But the good news is we can balance them with our fork. Specific foods can disrupt hormone levels. That can be fixed by avoiding the disruptive food for at least 3 days. In her book, The Hormone Reset Diet, Dr. Gottfried lays out a 21-day plan for 7 weight-related hormones.
It was gradual. It wasn't like a shock to my system. It wasn't like, oh, okay, now you're off of all these foods at once, and it wasn't overwhelming. It was done in small little bits and pieces.
Starting with red meat and alcohol, which can raise estrogen.
Estrogen is what makes us feminine. It gives us breasts and hips. But when it's out of whack, when it's too high relative to progesterone, it's going to make you have weight loss resistance. You're not going to be able to lose weight no matter what.
There are substitutes.
When I would come home at night, I would get a wine glass and I would just fill it with seltzer and apple cider vinegar. I felt like I was drinking wine.
The next 3 days, add fruit to the off-limits list to reset leptin.
It's the satiety hormone, and that means it controls your hunger.
Then give up caffeine, which disrupts cortisol.
Cortisol is the main stress hormone. And when it's too high, it grows this muffin top. It just gives you belly fat that you can't get rid of.
So once I've come off the caffeine, I was sleeping like a baby.
Thyroid levels that are too high or too low can cause problems.
Some of the common symptoms are thinning hair, weight gain, typically 10, 20 pounds, fatigue, depression.
Eliminate grains to reset your thyroid.
I grew up in an Italian family and they serve you like a half a pound of pasta. So I was dying. How am I going to do that?
She did it by eating pasta substitutes like spaghetti squash or shirataki noodles. Next, avoid sweets to balance insulin.
The sugar cravings were completely gone after 4 days. And I was really addicted to sugar.
Abstain from milk products to reset your growth hormone.
Dairy, I thought would be hard for me because I like cheese so much. But I replaced it with hummus and I was fine. I didn't even miss it.
Finally, avoid environmental toxins like plastic and certain cosmetics to balance testosterone.
The average woman puts on about 515 synthetic chemicals every day on her skin.
After you've reset your hormones, you don't necessarily have to avoid these things forever. Every 3 days, add one back and see how your body responds, because everyone's different.
And then you feel like a blank canvas. And you're like, you've gotten rid of all these foods and you feel so great. And then you get to bring them back and see what happens, and that's kind of interesting.
When Lori resumed eating red meat, there was no change, so it's still on the menu. Dairy, however, brought a different result. She gained 5 pounds in just 3 days, a clear sign to stay away.
I felt like I was doing a science project on myself.
That was just the beginning.
I missed my caffeine, I thought. So I had a cup of coffee, and that night I didn't sleep. And that was it. I just never had it again.
So for women, hormones often dictate whether the body will burn fat or hold on to it. By replacing disruptive foods with healthy substitutions, we gain another weapon in the battle of the bulge. Boris Johnson, CBN News.
You can learn about other important health issues tonight on Healthy Living at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News channel. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
In ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News.
It's hard to turn down a frozen treat on a hot summer day like a Flavor Pop ice cream, but its makers Take a Pop, Share a Smile program does much more for young cancer patients. It has provided freezers full of the pops to children's hospital across the country. Oftentimes, children fighting cancer deal with rough bouts of nausea. The frozen pops help them with that and usually puts a big smile on their face. And it's called Flavor Ice Pop. Well, folks, that is it for this edition of NewsWatch. We hope you will join us again next time. From all of us here at CBN, God bless you and have a great day.